Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is pretty simple. Take this huge stack of sources we've got and we'll pull out the most compelling, sometimes really bizarre, but fundamentally important insights. Just for you.
And today, we are really diving deep. We're embarking on a journey, you could say, into the heart of what these sources describe as esoteric, political, and spiritual manipulation.
Yeah, it's a big one. Our subject is Robert Francis Prevost. He's the man who, well, now occupies this singularly significant position, known, at least in the circles that produce these investigations, as Pope Leo XIV.
That's him. And the sources, as you mentioned, they're not your usual documents.
No, definitely not. It's extraordinary material, really.
Yeah.
It demands a unique approach. We're not working with, public records or history books here. Our stack today, it's entirely transcripts from multiple independent, synchronized, hypnotic investigations.
That's the key word, isn't it? Synchronized. These sessions, they were conducted basically at the same time across different languages. You had French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian. Yeah. And the operators, the people doing the investigation under hypnosis, they were completely unaware of the subject beforehand. They were all essentially pointed at the same, let's call it energetic frequency simultaneously.
Right. And the power of doing it that way, as we've talked about before, it lies in triangulating the results, doesn't it? When you get dozens of independent operators, none talking to each other, confirming the same core data points.
Yeah.
That gives you the consensus view.
Exactly. It gives us reliable markers. It's like finding the main structural beams of the reality being looked at.
The consensus gives us the scaffolding. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
And this is crucial, where we often find the really vivid stuff, the shocking details, the intricate mechanics of how it all works, that often comes from the specific narratives, the unique granular data that pops up in individual sessions. That's where the surprises are. Okay, so that's our mission today then. Two parts, really. First, let's nail down the concrete consensus, what everyone seemed to agree on. And second, let's put that side by side with the most specific, sometimes incredible, and even contradictory individual stories that came through.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's start right at the beginning. We have to talk about the nature of the entity, the being, inhabiting this role. Forget the image of the man on the balcony for just a second. What did the investigators find out about his true identity, or maybe lack thereof, on the energetic, the ethereal plane? Before the election, we all saw.
Well, the finding here was pretty immediate across the board and consistent. The consensus, looking at the Pope's ethereal essence, was that it was overwhelmingly non-human, or at the very least, heavily, heavily hybridized.
Not subtle then.
Not at all. This wasn't some faint signal. It was the primary energetic signature that nearly every single operator detected right away.
And the dominant frequency, the one that kept coming up no matter the language or the Reptiloid influence, right?
That's the one that surfaced most consistently, yes. Reptiloid. Now, how did they quantify that? Because hearing something like 50-50 split, it sounds almost too analytical, doesn't it, for an energetic reading?
Yeah, exactly. How does that work?
It's a great question. Usually the quantification comes from how the operator's own consciousness perceives the, let's say, the density and the temperature of the essence's frequency. Reptiloid essences are often described as having a colder feel, denser, very structural, almost rigid.
Right.
So while some sessions did perceive a kind of 50-50 human-reptilian split, which might suggest some kind of, balanced duality, the majority actually leaned towards a heavier reptilian dominance, often citing figures up to 60% reptilian.
60%.
Yeah. And the Italian sessions, for instance, they consistently noted a very high density and this distinct feeling of the essence being pre-programmed, like it wasn't acting spontaneously.
Yeah. Okay, so we're definitely dealing with something not purely human at its core. But the sources mentioned even stranger components, didn't they?
Yeah.
Beyond just the reptilian aspect, things that sound almost like, advanced tech.
Absolutely. The presence of artificial intelligence, or intelligence artificielle, as the French sources termed it, IA, that was a recurring element. And it wasn't just described as an influence, like background noise. It suggested a technological consciousness layer had actually been integrated into the essence itself.
Integrated, like merged.
Almost like an esoteric operating system, if you can imagine that, which, according to the sources, allows the entity to function with a level of cold calculation and maybe even remote update capability that, an organic spiritual being just wouldn't have.
A technological soul layer. That's that's pretty chilling.
It is. And then, as you said, there are also mentions of a point, like a hint or a trace of other extraterrestrial DNA, and even some minor phelinoid influence, which interestingly, we'll see ties into the sort of higher management structure later on.
Right, okay, so it's complex.
Very. The essence was described as a complex matrix of different frequencies. But, to really hammer home this idea of it being treated as an object rather than a naturally evolving soul, one specific session quantified the modifications with, frankly, extreme precision.
Ah, is this the number that really jumped out, the 214 hybridizations?
That's the one, yes. That particular Spanish operator claimed 214 distinct hybridizations or updates had been performed on the original essence over time, like software patches.
Wow.
And the operator's conclusion was pretty stark. The entity was being treated as a cosa, an object, a piece of hardware by whatever system is controlling things, designed and optimized over centuries specifically for this task. It essentially just removes the whole idea of genuine autonomous soul development,
Okay. So if the essence is a program, then the physical body is just the container, the shell.
Pretty much, yeah.
And this leads us to some of the most, frankly, outlandish and specific claims regarding the body itself, this idea of a vessel swap. The consensus seemed to be that he was a vessel, but one session gave this incredibly precise anecdote of how that vessel was apparently secured.
It really speaks to the level of detail you sometimes get in these individual deep dives, doesn't it? I mean, the sources generally confirmed he was perceived as a puppet or a good candidate, and importantly, fully consenting on a subliminal level.
Right, the trade-off thing.
Exactly, the dawn on it. He viewed the arrangement, apparently, as a necessary trade-off to achieve his own goal of, doing good. But the Romanian session specifically detailed that this individual, Robert Francis Prevost, wasn't just sort of born into this role naturally.
They claimed the original person, the original soul, born into that body, was replaced later on. Is that right?
Precisely. The replacement happened later in life. The claim suggests that when the individual was around 26 years old, there was a specific moment, and they located it very precisely, in a forest in Austria where the original soul was swapped out.
Swapped out, just gone.
And the body was then, according to this source, converted into an empty bionic container, ready for this external program, this hybridized essence, to take over. It suggests a pre-planned physical substitution, engineered almost to ensure a clean slate for the operating system to be installed.
Hang on, I have to stop you there. A bionic container, what does that imply? Does the source suggest the body itself is, like, augmented? Partially artificial?
Well, the term used suggested more of a functional emptiness, maybe. A physical form capable of being externally driven, almost like a highly complex automaton, but looking perfectly human. It implies the physical vehicle itself might have been engineered or modified somehow to maintain stability, to accept the high energetic load of this installed program. Maybe that explains the AI component we talked about earlier.
A fusion, engineered biology and AI control.
It establishes this chilling level of, non-human control right down to the physical level of the figurehead. Yeah.
And if we needed any more confirmation that the physical body is just seen as, like, disposable hardware, well, then we look at maybe the most extreme claim of all, the clone lab near the Vatican.
Yeah, this one. This is probably the single most shocking individual revelation. It came from another independent Spanish session. The operator didn't just see the Pope's current form as a physical clone, but saw that the system actually had backups, ready to go.
Backups? How many? And how are they supposedly stored?
3. 3 other identical physical clones, stored inactive, asleep, essentially in a secret physical laboratory. And the description was incredibly specific, a glass closet, which suggests maybe they're preserved or maintained in some kind of suspended animation, perhaps in fluid.
Wow. And physically located near the Vatican?
Physically near the Vatican, yes.
Yeah.
And connected by what were described as light cables.
Light cables. Okay, that suggests what? Real-time synchronization, remote data streaming maybe? Like if this main clone body gets damaged or something.
Exactly. The implication seems to be real-time connectivity. These clones, they apparently share the exact same physical makeup, the same reptilian DNA component, and are essentially synchronized data points waiting. If the primary vessel is compromised, damaged, gets sick, whatever the system, doesn't lose the data, the programming, it can simply activate a backup.
So the body is just utility.
Yeah.
A disposable container waiting for maintenance or replacement.
That's the inescapable conclusion from that particular source, yes.
Okay, so let's just recap that for a second. We have an essence that's been quantified, hybridized over 200 times, infused with AI and reptilian DNA, potentially inserted into a swapped, maybe bionic vessel around age 26, and now physically backed up by 3 identical clones in some kind of high-tech storage unit near the Holy See. Yeah. this figure, Leo the XIV, he really is presented as a fully programmed entity, isn't he?
It certainly sets the stage for everything that follows, doesn't it? The election wasn't really about choosing a man. It was about positioning a precisely engineered, well, object.
Okay, so given this incredibly manufactured identity, let's move to the next layer, the preparation, because the sources were unanimous on this, right? This wasn't a spontaneous event. His path to the papacy was, according to them, entirely predetermined.
Absolute consensus on that. Yes, every single investigation confirmed the entire process was planned, orchestrated long, long ago. It was described as a system to say, like, woven, intricately woven into the very fabric of the institution. There was no actual election debate in the real sense. The subliminal conditions had been perfectly set up to ensure this specific outcome. He was always going to be the one.
And what's fascinating, too, is the sort of psychological negotiation that apparently went into securing this vessel in the first place. The sources mentioned his essence was really consenting to the interference, right? But saw it as a kind of trade-off to achieve his own goal of doing good.
That Donna, the giving, the trade-off, that seems absolutely key. He was aware, on some level, of the manipulation, the non-human control involved, but he rationalized it, apparently, as a necessary evil to achieve what he perceived as greater good, maybe salvation or guidance for humanity.
So the system needed his willing participation.
It seems so, because the system assessed his potential based on one really crucial human characteristic.
Which was?
His ability to appear luminous, to appear trustworthy.
Ah, okay. The public face.
Exactly. His essence apparently had this high potential to radiate what humans perceive as good intentions, to seem attractive, trustworthy to the collective consciousness, and to maximize their influence, the system needed a face that people would naturally trust. It maximizes the energetic harvest potential down the line, you see.
So the negotiation was strategic. Like, we'll grant your desire to do good, but the price is total control and insertion into our program.
That seems to be the core of it, yes. Your desire is granted, but on our terms.
Right. And to prepare an essence with the kind of range needed to project that sort of credibility convincingly, the system would have had to expose him to some incredibly varied life experiences, wouldn't it?
That seems to be the explanation for the wildly contradictory yet weirdly specific claims about his immediate past lives.
Yeah, they almost sound like, I don't know, data logs designed to gather specific knowledge sets rather than actual lives lived.
Yeah.
The sheer variety is just remarkable.
It really is.
Let's just run through the list quickly because they are so specific, they almost sound like different characters in some cosmic play.
Okay. Well, we have at least 4 totally disparate human experiences cited as preparation for this essence. One session saw him as a musician in the U.S. around the 1950s. So a life immersed in mass entertainment, popular culture, contemporary creativity of that era.
Okay, musician. Then contrast that with the 1848 Argentine comedian.
Yeah, exactly. Another session claimed he was a comedian, in Argentina way back in 1848. And the operator was apparently shown the image of a guitar and got a strong sense of humor around the topic. So, again, performance, crowd psychology, but separated by a whole century from the U.S. musician. It really does look like a deliberate gathering of knowledge about, controlling mass sentiment through art, through humor, across different times and cultures.
And the preparation wasn't just artistic, it included political intensity too, didn't it?
It did, yeah. A Russian session identified a life where he was a revolutionary, and they specifically drew parallels to Lenin. Yeah. A figure totally focused on radical systemic change, mass mobilization. So that lifetime, presumably, gave the essence crucial knowledge on how to dismantle old structures, how to seize political power, which you could argue is pretty essential for the kind of systemic changes apparently planned for the church now.
Okay, musician, comedian, revolutionary. And then there was a 5th one mentioned, wasn't there? The physicist who died tragically.
Yes. And that life seems to have provided the traumatic catalyst. He was apparently a physical scientist, maybe a physicist, and he died in some kind of nuclear-like explosion during an experiment he was conducting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the essence carried this deep sense of failure, of trauma from that experience. And following this catastrophic death, that's when the interfering entity supposedly stepped in. They found him in that state and promised him a new life, a chance to be a savior, a chance for redemption if he agreed to their program.
So his desire to do good, that core motivation they needed, it might not be entirely authentic. It could be like a trauma response that was engineered by these controlling entities into a mechanism for cooperation.
That's precisely the implication. If you synthesize these lives, the politician, the artist, the scientist, the common thread seems to be the strategic harvesting of specific data, specific experiences needed for this final experiment, as one source called it.
Knowledge of mass psychology, cultural relevance, science, politics.
Exactly. It doesn't really sound like spiritual refinement, does it? It sounds more like a high-level corporate training program designed for, well, esoteric domination.
Yeah. Suddenly, the transition from a 1950s musician to a potentially bionic vessel ready for a papal election, it almost seems logical in a weird, twisted way if you see it as advanced management.
It's the ultimate expression of tailored candidate selection, perhaps.
Okay, now we move to the centerpiece event itself.
Yeah.
The conclave, the election. If the candidate was already chosen, already prepared like this, then the election was, just as the sources repeatedly confirmed, pure theater. Right.
The consensus on this was absolute.
Yeah.
Every session that touched on it described the voting process as nothing more than a facade of theater. It was already played out. The outcome was set, programmed, orchestrated. The cardinals, in this view, were simply playing their assigned parts in a production. The script had been finalized long before they even gathered.
Okay. And while these human theatrics were happening in the Sistine Chapel, what was supposedly going on the metaphysical plane?
Well, according to the sources, the entities orchestrating the whole thing were gathered for what was described metaphorically as a feast.
A feast.
Yeah. The sources didn't describe, like, a struggle or tense negotiations among the entities. Instead, they painted this picture of celebration. The controlling entities were apparently having fun planning the final moments, viewing the election as a guaranteed success, a celebration almost of their long-term project finally coming to fruition.
That implies a real sense of arrogance, doesn't it? Mastery over the human political and religious process.
It does. But even if the script was set, the humans involved, the cardinals casting the votes, they still needed to be, well, managed, controlled. And this brings us to that really disturbing claim about what they might have been consuming during the conclave itself.
Oh, yes. This detail came up quite a bit, didn't it?
It did. It's a critical individual detail that surfaced frequently enough that we have to pay attention to it. Several sessions perceived the cardinals were consuming some kind of substance, often described as something mixed into their drinks, maybe their food, and the effect was to amplify their emotions, their feelings, even their thoughts.
It was called a drug in some reports, or even, most dramatically, serpent venom, which is obviously a highly loaded term.
It is incredibly loaded. Whether it was meant literally as some kind of chemical venom or maybe an energetic equivalent, the function described was clear. It was acting as a subliminal programming agent.
So not to kill them, but to, what, lower their defenses?
Exactly. The purpose was apparently to disturb their normal reality, lower their mental and energetic defenses, make them more suggestible.
So they were being primed for channeling, essentially.
That seems to be the idea. The sources consistently noted that many of the attendees, the voters, were still described as partially human, meaning they still had enough free will or maybe human resistance that they needed this chemical or energetic boost to make them more easily channeled, more easily influenced by the entities who were present metaphysically during the final vote. It just ensured smooth, unquestioning compliance with the predetermined outcome.
Wow. Okay, so that adds a layer of potentially chemical manipulation on top of the spiritual domination. It's like ensuring the physical reality perfectly mirrors the energetic reality they'd set up.
It's about closing all possible loopholes, isn't it? Ensuring nothing goes off script.
Right. Okay, let's transition now to the symbolism. The name chosen for this newly installed leader, Leo XIV. The sources were clear. This name wasn't just random or accidental either.
No, entirely strategic, chosen specifically for its immediate psychological impact. The name Leo, or Leon in French, it immediately connects to the powerful symbol of the lion, doesn't it?
Yeah. Strength, power.
Exactly. Force, dominance, royalty. One session specifically noted the strong association people might make with figures like Louis XIV, the Sun King in France. It emphasizes a return to force, a powerful, assertive new era for the church. It projects strength.
So the new face needed to project not just light and trustworthiness, but also power, authority.
Precisely. And one session offered this ultimate detail about the name's timing. Apparently, it wasn't a sudden choice made during the conclave. The name Leo XIV was supposedly chosen by the Pope's essence itself before incarnation. It was integrated into the program right from the very start.
He was programmed with his own branding.
Essentially,
Yeah.
yes. It was pre-selected because the lion is such a potent power symbol, easily assimilated by the masses. As one operator put it, translating the Spanish insight, "Tengo ya dicho ya, es como leona tiene fuerza." Basically, Leo already says he's like a lion. He has strength. It's immediate, easily digestible symbolism. Strength, authority. Perfectly setting the stage for the next phase, the energy harvest.
Okay, so the election theater, the potentially bionic pope, the strategically chosen name, it all leads up to this moment of maximum output, doesn't it? The public announcement of the balcony in St. Peter's Square. Because the primary function of this whole system, according to these sources, is energy harvest. And they describe this specific moment as generating an effet boom énergétique, a huge energy boom.
It was the payoff, yeah. The culmination. The immense anticipation in the crowd, the surprise element, the collective sigh of relief. All of that created this tremendously potent, energetic boom. And the sources weren't just describing, a wave of emotion. They were describing a massive spike in usable, harvestable energy.
Right, and we need to really dissect the components of that energy, because it wasn't just positive feelings, was it?
Oh, far from it. The energy harvested was described as this complex, very dense cocktail. Yes, absolutely. There was relief, there was joy, there was hope. Those higher frequencies associated with welcoming a new guide, a new leader. But these were heavily mixed with much lower frequencies, deep sadness, fear of uncertainty, and critically, what was termed the fear of being alone, which the religious egregore apparently just feeds on.
Okay, maybe we should quickly define that term egregore for anyone unfamiliar.
Good point, yeah. The egregore, in this context, is essentially a collective energetic thought form, an entity created and sustained over centuries by the focused belief, worship, fear, and emotion directed towards a particular institution or idea, in this case, the church.
So a massive, complex energy structure built by human belief.
Correct. And the Pope's role on that balcony, according to these sources, was primarily that of an antenna. He was there to channel that highly charged collective consciousness, especially those low frequencies of fear and guilt, directly up towards this controlling structure, the egregore, reinforcing its power exponentially in that single moment.
Wow. Now let's talk about the actual state of that energy, because this is where one individual session provided this almost physical, visual description. The energy wasn't just invisible waves. It apparently became palpable.
This is genuinely one of the most incredible sensory reports from the entire stack of sources. The energy coming off that frenzied crowd was apparently so dense, so concentrated by the sheer emotion of the moment, that it became jellified. That was a word used, jellified.
Jellified, like jelly.
The operator described it as having the physical consistency of soft plasticine, like modeling clay.
Which means it was easily manageable, right? Collectible.
Exactly. It made the energy directly and easily collectible and even moldable by the entities involved. The Pope's physical presence on the balcony served as the catalyst, the focal point, and also the potentiator. His messages, messages of peace and love broadcast to the masses, they served to stimulate and amplify the collective emotion, making the resulting energy highly potent for the entity's use. Even if sometimes the energy itself bypassed him directly and went straight to the egregore, he was the trigger.
Okay, so the energy was dense enough to be almost physically manipulated. And this unprecedented level of energetic output had a really shocking, apparently unexpected consequence. The spontaneous materialization of a high-ranking entity.
This is the kind of anecdotal gold that really defines these investigations sometimes. It's just, wow. Because of the sheer unusually high density of the collected energy, this gelatinous plasticine, a high-ranking entity, described as one of the Pope's direct superiors within the control hierarchy, spontaneously materialized into physical reality. Right then, right there.
Materialized. Physically. Where did this entity appear, and what was it doing?
It apparently materialized near the balcony, but off to the side slightly, specifically on a building to the right, sort of outside the main camera view, presumably.
Yeah.
And the entity was perceived as being surprised by its sudden ability to be in physical reality.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprised, but also ferocit, which translates from Romanian as very happy, joyful even. It was described as actively observing and studying the moment of peak energetic harvest, like a scientist watching an experiment succeed beyond expectation.
Wait, I need to process that. An entity high up in the control structure, usually non-physical, suddenly finds itself in physical reality because of an unusual concentration of human emotional energy. What does that even imply about, the veil between dimensions?
Well, it implies that the collective human consciousness, when it's concentrated and manipulated effectively enough, holds immense power, potentially enough power to actually bridge dimensional realities, even if only temporarily. The entity's surprise is key here. It suggests this wasn't actually planned. It was an unexpected bonus, a side effect, confirming that the effet boom énergétique had far exceeded even the system's own projections. It was a massive, tangible success for the interfering system.
It also gives us this chilling sense of their direct observation, doesn't it? They weren't just remotely feeding off the energy. One of them was physically present, apparently studying the mechanics of the harvest in real time.
It's the highest form of data gathering, isn't it? Field research conducted in a newly acquired physical body. This whole scene is perhaps the single most crucial individual detail reported because it shows the immediate physical consequences of this highly choreographed event.
Okay, so this massive energetic harvest, it serves not just the religious egregore itself, but feeds into a much grander plan, right? One involving global politics, systemic control. The sources confirm this election wasn't just a religious event, it was a global readjustment.
Oh, absolutely it was. The consensus across the investigation showed that the moment Leo XIV was announced, global political plans, agendas essentially paused or shifted to accommodate this new reality. And a very strong line of control, or at least influence, was traced directly back to the United States.
Right. We need to unpack that connection. What's the nature of this U.S. dominance over the papacy, according to the sources?
Well, the investigations consistently suggested that America, the U.S., holds predominio dominance over the Vatican. And this is secured through deep financial flows, covert agreements, and strong links to military and geopolitical strategy. Specifically, some sources pointed to things like the financing of global conflicts, arms sales, the placement of military bases. These were seen as key bargaining chips, ensuring the Vatican's compliance with certain agendas.
And then there's that highly specific, almost unbelievable claim from one individual session regarding a potential direct political handler.
Yes. This came from a Spanish session. It made the explicit claim that this pope was, in fact, subservient to political orders coming from the American president at the time, specifically naming Trump. Now, obviously, we have to report this impartially, simply as a claim arising from the source material itself. We're not endorsing it, just reporting it.
Of course.
But it illustrates the hierarchy of control perceived by that particular operator. That the Vatican's new leadership isn't spiritually autonomous, but is ultimately influenced by, or even answers to, certain U.S. political interests. It effectively places the religious figurehead beneath the political and financial elite within the perceived global structure.
Okay, so that positions the papacy potentially as a tool, a very powerful tool for political consolidation within some kind of New World Order framework.
Yeah.
If that's the geopolitical layer, let's dive into what the sources described as the core systemic mission of this particular pontificate.
Yeah.
Creating what was called the new trap.
Right, because the primary goal described isn't really spiritual renewal in the traditional sense. It's system optimization. The old system, based on rigid dogma, maybe fear, was apparently losing its energetic effectiveness. People were drifting away. So the new structure aims to unify, to attract more people back into the fold, especially those who've become disillusioned or maybe move into more New Age type philosophies.
They need a softer image, a more inclusive exterior.
Precisely. This means modernizing the church's public face. Appearing to clean up the church, as one Italian source put it, spazzare via la muffa, literally sweeping away the mold.
Okay.
And this apparently includes being seen as more flexible on certain social issues, maybe partially addressing things like LGBTQ plus concerns or incorporating elements that might appeal to people interested in energy work, meditation, things the church traditionally shunned.
So it's the illusion of purification and freedom designed specifically to lure people back into a structure they might have previously rejected.
That's how the sources frame it, yes. It is the ultimate trap. The perceived reform creates this sense of freedom to choose, making the system seem attractive again, relevant again. But the subliminal goal, according to these investigations, is to transform the church into a massive portone, a gateway, a portal designed to aggregate the maximum amount of collective energy as efficiently as possible.
And the investigators called this end goal the Prigione Infinita, an infinite prison.
Yes, an infinite prison designed to channel mass energy. And their internal target for effectiveness was apparently very high, convincing something like 93% of humanity to participate, consciously or unconsciously, in this modernized energy trap.
93%. Wow. An infinitely scalable prison that actually looks like a sanctuary. Okay, this level of systemic change, this ambition, it would require a pretty high-level management shift behind the scenes, wouldn't it? And the sources provided some fascinating insights into the entities supposedly controlling the egregore itself.
They did. This is one of the most detailed individual narratives that came through, primarily from an Italian session. It described kind of changing of the guard among the highest controllers of this particular energy structure. The entity who was formerly managing the religious egregore was identified as a falconoid entity named Airfes.
Falconoid, okay, and Airfes was being replaced.
Yes. According to the source, Airfes was lamenting his forced handover of power to a new, apparently more sophisticated entity, a filonoid named Zork.
Zork, a filonoid, okay.
Yeah. Airfes noted that his old methods, perhaps more rigid or fear-based, were becoming obsolete. And this new, more elegant strategy, embodied by Leo XIV, was necessary because the old system was simply losing its grip on humanity's consciousness.
So what does this new filonoid manager, Zork, predict for the future of this operation?
Zork's prediction, according to the source, was massive. 200 years. 200 years of filonoid rule via this new, highly sophisticated, much more subtle system of control.
2 centuries.
It suggests a major shift in the cosmic power dynamic controlling this sphere, moving from maybe an overtly structured falconoid system to a more adaptable, perhaps more psychologically astute, filonoid management, one that understands the necessity of adapting to contemporary human consciousness, rather than just trying to suppress it.
It just shows how adaptive and relentless this interfering system is portrayed as being. But even Zork and the filonoids, they aren't the absolute apex, are they? The investigations apparently reach even higher to this entity described as the cosmic rider.
Yes. This is the ultimate peak of the perceived hierarchy, detailed by a particularly advanced Spanish operator, a luminous, non-physical energy entity, referred to as the Rider of the Universe. This entity operates on a scale far, far beyond just Earth. It apparently sees all possible timelines for the Pope 4 were available for him, it seems, and views the entire earthly conflict, all the suffering and manipulation, essentially as data points in a much larger cosmic pattern.
And its perspective on human suffering, on the chaos, it's terrifyingly detached, isn't it?
Completely. This entity, according to the source, views human suffering, the manipulation, the chaos on Earth, not as something inherently bad or good for that matter, but simply as necessary movement, necessary friction for the universe to function. It sees the whole system of interference, the filonoids, the reptilians, the energy harvesting, as a natural engine of universal balance.
Necessary movement. How does it perceive humanity within that grand scope?
The entity was described as observing Earth through what felt like a magnifying glass, treating individual humans and humanity as a whole as minuscule, almost insignificant data points in a vast universal calculation. It's worth noting, though, that the operator who perceived this entity was recorded as vehemently challenging this viewpoint, arguing strongly against the profound lack of empathy and the justification of suffering as just necessary movement.
That challenge is critical, isn't it? It shows that even within these deep esoteric investigations, the human perspective, the human value system, is pushing back against that cold, detached, high-level management view.
Absolutely. It's a vital counterpoint.
So, okay, let's try and synthesize this. We have this cosmic rider figure overseeing the data, directing a filonoid manager, Zork, who in turn installs a potentially bionic reptilian hybridized clone as Pope, all for the ultimate purpose of creating an infinite energy prison disguised as unification and spiritual renewal.
That is the synthesized reality distilled from these dozens of independent, multilingual investigations, yes. It paints a picture of a highly sophisticated, adaptive, systemic plan designed to control not through overt force anymore, but through irresistible attraction, through co-option.
It's the duality that really resonates, doesn't it? The man who might have once been a musician or a revolutionary, now potentially encased in a bionic vessel, radiating programmed light and hope, while acting as a puppet under this new, incredibly sophisticated, cosmically managed plan for unification that is actually described as a deeper form of energy control.
The central repeating insight here, I think, is the system's perceived ability to evolve. It realized, perhaps, that the old strategy's rigid dogma, visible corruption over evil were failing in the modern age. So the new strategy is presented as subtle, attractive, technologically advanced. It adapts its energetic grip to fit a modernized, spiritually searching populace. The system is effectively changing the definition of faith and spirituality to better suit its own harvesting requirements.
And yet, this highly choreographed game, which the filonoid Zork apparently predicts will last for 200 years. It relies entirely on one factor that even the sources admit is unpredictable: the collective human consciousness. Our sources noted that while the Pope himself might be a predictable program, The human masses are ultimately impredictable, unpredictable.
That is the final and perhaps the ultimate variable in this whole equation. The system, according to these accounts, has installed the perfect shepherd. It's created the perfect illusion of freedom, of light, of renewal. But what happens if that unpredictable collective consciousness, maybe sensing the deception beneath the shiny surface of the new sanctuary, chooses collectively to look elsewhere, to look outside the system entirely?
When the spiritual guidance you seek is revealed, through sources like these, to potentially be a carefully managed, multi-layered program, and the ultimate decision-makers view your planet's struggles as nothing more than necessary movement, what then is your next move? What do you choose?
That really is the question we have to leave you with, isn't it? Your ability, our ability, to observe critically, to reflect deeply on what we're told, what we feel, what we believe. That might be the only way to navigate this incredibly complex and apparently adaptive system of control that these sources describe.
Observe critically. Reflect deeply. That was the deep dive.